Greetings, everyone. Thank you for your interest in the presentation. I've titled it Committed Climate Action, a matter of concern in ESD in Southern Africa. And I've put it as a question so that we can be able to appreciate the issues which I'm going to bring up in this presentation. We live in a region projected to be most likely impacted by the ravages of climate change. Therefore, we need urgent pedagogical innovations to address SDG 13, taking action to combat climate change and its impact. Let me quote from Professor Robert Cole in the Conversation Africa, who observed that we have crossed the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming level, which is the global level target set by the IPCC some years ago. And according to Professor Robert Cole, we are already experiencing extreme weather events leading to drought, flooding, energy generation deficits, and worsening poverty and vulnerability. And we have seen it in the region just recently in 2019. Cyclone Idai actually made landfall in Mozambique and Zimbabwe and Malawi, and the hard hit with more than 1,300 people dead. So climate change is a serious matter which worsens the vulnerability of communities. I like to also quote this assertion here from the opening chapter of the book, Schooling for Sustainable Development in Africa, which identifies some of the challenges and vulnerabilities which are linked to the colonial past and to a variety of risks and uncertainties. Efforts at localizing and reforming the education system have not been successfully achieving erasing the colonial vestiges, making it difficult to fully contextualize the education system to address the escalating levels of risk. And if we fail to address the main driver of vulnerabilities, that is climate change, through education, we can only see worsening inequality and poverty. And we pose three questions which center on education and climate action. First, why is the role of education somewhat ambivalent when it comes to SDG 13 in climate action? Are curriculum reforms radical enough to assure climate action in education? These are the questions I would like us to reflect through my presentation and see if we can answer to our commitment for climate action through education. Now I got motivation for this here to answer, for example, question 1 from reading Christina Kwak's paper on roadblocks to quality education in time of climate change. Christina Kwak is at the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution. And I found this paper very interesting because it kind of fleshes out the roadblocks to include the following: historical antecedents and poor framing of curriculum reforms as inspired by an ESD frame of reference. She also identifies lack of resources to support teacher agency and leadership for transformative learning for climate action. And she also identifies lack of curriculum connections to local traditions and real-life challenges and the vulnerabilities confronting the learners. And we may add for the purpose of our paper here that pedagogical practices in educational institutions in Southern Africa are frequently at variance with pedagogical practices in social institutions, the family, and the community. And this might serve as a serious roadblock for education to act on climate change. Now, for the second question, we have conducted a case study of curriculum reforms aimed at three targets. The reforms in Zambia, the reforms in Zimbabwe, they are targeting educational relevance, educational quality, and societal transformation through education. These are important aims for the curriculum reforms which have been conducted. For example, the Zambia National Curriculum Framework was launched in 2013, and the Zimbabwean Curriculum Framework for Primary and Secondary Education was launched in 2016. And these are important curriculum documents because they give us positive directions of the transformation and reform which might be relevant for climate action. For example, they adopt an outcome-based approach focusing on competencies and life skills. And they aim to localize aspects of the curriculum and to exploit the experiences and knowledge found in local communities. Particularly the Zimbabwe curriculum, it adopts a heritage-based approach guided by an Ubuntu philosophy and a value framework. And in both countries, we see the integration of cross-cutting issues and ESD principles into different learning areas or subjects. And new roles and professional standards for teachers are also defined as equal. And so we tend to believe that these are progressive reforms in Southern Africa, but we still have the question, why does climate action through education remain a concern, even with these reforms? Are they radical enough, the reforms which have taken place? We can find some anecdotal evidence to answer this question of are they radical enough by looking at the science curriculum, for example, which derives from this syllabus, from these reforms. For example, the chemistry 50-70 syllabus for senior secondary in Zambia. I did a simple search of key terms which might link to climate change and which might motivate people to undertake climate action. And the terms which were present in the syllabus were the following: care, occurred 5 times, pollution once, effects 12 times in relation to the environment, and the environment was mentioned 25 times, and global warming once, greenhouse effects once, ozone layer once, and the people once. And the terms which were absent were climate, disaster, hazard, lifestyle. And so one would question how this would address climate action if it is not touching on issues which are linked to climate change. Now, I've also listed below the examples of how these issues are presented in the syllabus. For example, AIM 5.6 states that stimulate interest in and care for the local and global environment. And some of the syllabus items identified around certain chemical topics were listed there: care for the environment when disposing waste products, caring for the environment when using fertilizers, care for the environment when disposing by experiment, effects of the use of fuels on the environment, such as pollution, greenhouse effects of global warming, and it goes on like that. And these are the things which were reflected in the science syllabus. And so we see here a science syllabus which is teaching chemistry concepts to students, but does not do justice to the issues to do with climate change. And the result is we are unlikely to influence the attitudes and the values and the behaviors of the learners with this syllabus. We also did a survey in 2015 in Quito district, and this was a collaboration with Ms. Campanda and Ivone Goterero from Laurentian University in Canada. And we kind of surveyed the teachers and the students, senior grade students in the district. And one of the concerns here is the issue of teacher leadership, which the teachers seem to express perception that they did not have capacity. For example, the first quote there is an example of a quote which reflects that the teachers expect the school managers, the school heads, to be the ones who are organizing and doing these things like environmental clubs and not themselves. And you can see this particular quotation. There are other things I need to do. Time is a factor, which means potentially climate change learning cannot be supported in a practical manner because of that belief. And I need to question also the quality of learning which is reflected. It would seem like the learning in the school system and also in the media might result in inadequate understanding by the learners. For example, you do have here an example of a student who says, because of the same gases, I remember the second point last month on the news. They said that Zambia was experiencing heat waves for 3 days. And it was because of the same gases that we had. Direct rays of sunlight through our skin. The same gases also help in destroying the ozone. And so this particular learner may not have grasped the full understanding of climate change messages and the causal factors of climate change. And as we see, if the curriculum is not able to support the kind of learning in a qualitative way, in spite of the reforms which require cross-cutting issues, we see that the reforms may not be radical enough. We also identified some case studies which we thought were interesting to demonstrate that there is also insufficient transfer of educational experiences and pedagogical approaches from a variety of interventions which involve informal, formal, and non-formal education in Southern Africa. These case studies I've got on display there illustrate experiences of community engagement, collaboration with the community and government partners, engaging learners as co-creators of knowledge, and as leaders for climate action. And the approaches which they use are not commonly found in the delivery of the formal curriculum. And what we see in this here I think models of learning as connection and collaboration among the schools, non-governmental organizations, municipalities, and environmental experts. What we wonder is why are the pedagogical approaches used in these initiatives not institutionalized in formal education for these approaches to be able to drive climate action forward? For example, the first case example from the Kipetekela Foundation in Lusaka, this works with the Pescadores Education Center in Lusaka, which is offering education at all levels of education up to senior secondary. We find the learners being engaged in community service projects and in action projects such as recycling, biogas projects, tree planting, picking up litter, becoming waste management ambassadors in the city, working with the waste management companies in there. We also see, for example, in Zimbabwe, Mukumis Woodlands in Harare promoting and supporting learners to implement eco-schools change projects and environmental clubs. We also see resources which have been generated through projects such as the Smart Climate Action Learning Resources and Partnerships with Zambia, which is run by an NGO, Wildlife and Environmental Conservation Society of Zambia. They also work to implement a UNICEF-funded United for Climate Change and Conservation U4CC project, where we have got a climate change ambassador, where there was a climate change ambassadors program. Why are these kinds of flagship actions remaining isolated and not taken up into the formal education system to become part of the change which we need in order to drive climate action forward? And then we are also seeing the possibility that we might institutionalize heritage-based approaches so that we can connect to scientific and heritage interests in tackling cross-cutting issues such as climate change. We have learned something from the curriculum of reforms in Zimbabwe, where the heritage-based approach, which drives its inspiration from the Ubuntu philosophy, caught our attention. And we think that there is a case for reframing pedagogy for quality education for climate action by adopting this heritage-based approach. And we think that we have learned the importance of connections between culture, heritage, and science from the UNESCO Biospheres program, which has got these three interconnected functions of protecting biodiversity and cultural diversity, fostering economic and human development, and serving as a site for environmental education, training, and research. This is quite an inspiration which we need to draw from. And bio-reserve education is quite important because it respects the cultural heritage of a place and brings it into the education system. And we need to see these connections which are vital to the argument of this paper. We also see the possibility that if we want to radicalize for action towards climate action, we also need to consider Ubuntu philosophy and pedagogy. And quite a number of observations have been made about Ubuntu philosophy and pedagogy by a number of scholars. For example, that it is very common, it is a common ontological and epistemological category in the African thought among Bantu-speaking people. And its principles are associated with inclusivity, critical awareness, commitment, and that it is a collective cognitive model, which is quite vital. We find some attraction to this philosophy because the pedagogical practices in social institutions, the family and the community involve group dynamics characterized by participation, interaction, and collective decision-making and action. And these are not commonly practiced in the formal education system. And so we think Ubuntu can provide a perspective to frame or even reframe educational pedagogy. For example, Mr. and Madondo 2012 made a case for a relevant environmental pedagogy informed by this philosophy. And so, in a nutshell, where can we draw the inspiration to invigorate commitment and action for climate change through education? And I think what we have presented here in this paper is the possibility that we can use heritage-based approaches inspired by Ubuntu philosophy and pedagogy. And we need to cross the boundaries between the informal, non-formal, and formal education sectors. And this is illustrated, for example, in Kutetekela Foundation, in the NGO's approach, which was cited, and in the United for Climate Change project which UNICEF was running in Zambia, for example. And we see that we needed to transfer experiences from interventions, including the biospheres reserves, the eco schools programs, the climate change ambassadors programs, the regional centers of expertise experience with bringing together informal, non-formal, and formal education, the community-based organizations and NGOs. We need to bring these interventions into the mainstream, and so that we can help reshape the education system. We also think that if we strengthen STEM education, education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, this will increase access to knowledge and understanding knowledge associated with complex environmental issues such as and social issues such as climate change. And we see from a UNESCO report here that strong performance in science and awareness of global environmental problems tend to go hand in hand. And weak performance in science is associated with lower awareness of environmental problems. So this is why we have got to have this concern for radical climate action resistance. So in conclusion, I want us to reflect in a conference such as this on the question, are we doing enough to radically transform education for climate action? A conference such as this must shed some light. I thank you.